Let's go. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the night of the fuck-ups. I had just one job. I had to say one sentence and I did it wrong. I failed. And you know what? If you make a failure, nobody even notices. And when they do, they easily forget. So, welcome everyone once again. Let me introduce our today's speakers. First one would be Peťo Slivka from or ex-Slido, the co-founder of the Slido. Second one will be Igor Liška from Panaxeo. And last but not least is Adam, who is still working on his slides. So he will surprise us probably. Okay, so let's start with the first speaker, Peťo. Stage is yours. And Peťo will tell us more about what went wrong in Slido and how they fixed it. Peťo.
Hello everyone. So I would like to share the story of Christmas 2016. It's pretty long ago, but it was a really interesting day that we experienced, and so I thought it might be worth sharing with you. So just imagine it was just a regular Christmas. I was enjoying my free time with family until I received a call from a colleague. And it wasn't a call like Merry Christmas or something like that. It was, Slido doesn't work, fix it. So do you experience such calls or not really? Let's see if Slido works. Okay. Cool. So some of us never experienced such call, lucky you. Maybe you didn't fucked up anything before. But okay. So let's continue. So I received this call, and you can imagine it was really it went into details, like Slido doesn't work. Okay, cool, but does it work? What does it mean? What exactly is not working? So what's the step one when you are dealing with such issue? You have to find out what's wrong, isolate it, and probably, if possible, fix it. So in this case, it was pretty straightforward. I will open Slido and see. Oh, the clicker doesn't work now. Ah. Okay. So maybe it's me. Yeah, so that's the first step. Does it work on my machine? And in this case, it was pretty simple. It did not. And all that I can see is that site can be reached. But what does that mean exactly? So first of all, you have to have some monitoring in place and find out, like, is it some specific service that is causing this, or are the servers down, or is a cloud provider having an issue, or what? And in this case, it was all green, like everything works, so no issue from the monitoring side. Apart, just one graph was. I must be closer. Just one graph was going down, and that was the throughput to the service. So that means that we were not the only one that had an issue, but everyone had an issue connecting to Slido. And it might not seem like useful information, but it's really a big insight. Because I can remember at least one time in Slido that we had a report that Slido is not working, but it was specific to one region that was not able to connect to Slido because of some networking issue. But in this case, it wasn't regional, it was a global outage. So we had to dig deeper. So it obviously wasn't a database issue, so I had to move. There is, oh, it doesn't work, okay. So I had to look a layer up. So first of all, can I connect to some hosts remotely? And yes, everything works. So maybe it's service, one service up, like is load balancer working? And yes, it did work. So what is the issue between load balancer and the browser? And as it's in fact, yes, it was a freaking DNS issue. So so like what the hell, what can go wrong with DNS? And why the hell is Slido pointing nowhere? So that was the actual issue, that there was no name service pointing from Slido. So we had to look into Network Information Center República Dominicana, and we find out that domain is in a registrar hold status. You know what does it mean?
You haven't paid the bill.
We haven't paid the bill. But that's not actually true, but we will get to that. So step one, isolate the issue, was done. We already know that what's wrong. Now the funny part, we have to fix it. But how? Like it's not a bug. We cannot fix the code. It's not a service issue that we can we are not able to spin some hot backup. It's not a provide, sort of. It was provider issue, but not like cloud provider. There was like no redundancy that we can use. Apart from one, we have a redundant domain. So we come up with a plan. Plan A, pay for the damn domain. But the problem was that it was actually paid for 3 years in advance. So it was probably issue on the domain provider side, because we paid in advance, so we don't have such issues. But they had some bug or something in their services, so one did not communicate with the other, and one was thinking that we paid only for a year, and they just basically cut us off. So this was plan A. So let's call the support in Dominican Republic during Christmas, and let's hope for luck that anyone will answer the call. The answer is no, they did not. Plan B was to migrate everything to alternative domain. So at that time we already had a slido.com domain, and we eventually wanted to migrate anyway, but it sounds easier than it's done. And yeah, you can see from x.com that it took them a year to migrate from twitter.com.
Yeah, but he laid everyone, so there is no one doing the work.
Yeah, maybe that was the issue, that there was no one to do it. But in reality, you have issues with basically everything. And it's especially interesting when you don't have access to the old domain. So you have to deal with callback URLs from third-party services, or for example, Google SSO didn't work. You have cross-site issues, so the services don't want to talk together. Broken links and redirects. Those are especially interesting if you if you realize that the 301 status is cacheable, so once you use it, you will end up in redirect loop. And also mails doesn't work, so you are not able to use any verification emails and so on. So it was a really interesting situation, but yeah, there is nothing better to do during Christmas, so we started to work, and 6 hours later we resolved the issue. So somehow plan A succeeded. So as far as I know, we didn't manage to reach the support, but we managed to pay again. So maybe in reality they just want some more money from us or something. But anyway, after 6 hours it resolved and sly.do domain was back online. But also plan B was complete on about 80%. And most of the services were migrated to slido.com. So maybe if the downtime took a few more hours, it would save us years of upcoming troubles during our attempts to migrate to the domain. And in the end, the funny thing is that we have to roll back, like when the domain was live again, we have to roll back all the changes from that day immediately. So that's it. That's the maybe interesting story. And to sum it up, these are just some good practices that were useful also during this situation. So have a monitoring in place so you can really fast identify what's causing the issues. Have some redundancy, so some database replicas or hosting in multiple regions and so on. Have a working CI/CD flows, especially rollbacks, and be ready for surprises. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have now a window for questions. Do you have any questions? You can ask them live or you can use Slido. How would you rate your Christmas of 2016?
10 of 10.
What did you get at that Christmas? What kind of gift?
Socks.
Socks.
New domain. New domain.
It's socked. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have two questions. The first one, did you have some SLAs at the time? I see Slido is not a critical service. So what was the problem to wait for another day, for example, until they fix the problem?
That's good questions, because one of the questions at the time I can remember is like, who the fuck cares? It's Christmas. But in reality, there was actually some events during Christmas, because not everyone is celebrating, and we wanted to be recognized as global business, and even some people who were celebrating Christmas were using us. For example, some churches. So that's that was interesting find. But back to the original question, it was pretty long ago. I'm not really sure if we had some SLAs at that time. It probably could wait, but still, you don't want to be completely offline for too long.
Yeah, I know, but with Plan B, there was like pretty high risk that a lot of things may go wrong. So that's why I was surprised that you tried to go with plan B even there were no SLAs. Okay. And the second question was about domain. So what do you recommend to avoid a situation like that? Because you mentioned that the problem was actually between two domain providers. So on your side, if you had a system for, I don't know, for invoice payment monitoring or something like that, so everything was okay on your side, but there was problem between two domain providers. So what's your suggestion how to avoid situations like that? What's the redundancy plan for that?
That's something what I was thinking about before this presentation, and the answer is I have no idea. Because it's such a top level issue basically that there is not much that you can do. You just have to hope that they will not do such thing. So maybe it's better idea to host on some better domain like .com that has a bigger impact, and hopefully they don't have such problems.
Thank you, Mr. Provider. Okay, thank you.
And we can probably continue with the question from Slido. Were you able to assess the impact on the money, on the red revenue or monetary terms by this?
I'm not really sure. I think at that time, that's maybe a good thing that it happened. So basically, Slido was still in the beginnings. And I think that we don't really cared.
Did any church cancel their subscription, or they believe that you will fix it?
I don't know, probably. There are still some churches with this Slido, so I think we are fine.
It also pisses me off as I go to church, there is no Slido. Why was your domain in Dominican Republic? And who was the domain registrar?
Domain was in Dominican Republic because it was available. That's basically it. It was probably
Logo.
yeah. We actually the first logo was with a dot, so it was sly.do, and actually the name, because when we started, the first name was Inst Feedback of the service. Then we renamed to Instando, and then our colleague found out that there is a sly.do domain available, and that's what he wanted. He wanted a three-letter domain. And he found that this is free and it sounds cool, so why not?
And do you recall what service did you use to register this domain?
It's just the nick for the domain of the Dominican Republic, so the national registrar.
It's like a national company or state?
Yeah, national. Yeah, probably yes.
Like a study.
And how many people were called from the Christmas tree to work?
At least 3.
Yeah.
So one was working on plan A, one was working on plan B, that was me, and one was communicating between the two.
How many people did Slido have at the time?
Have you been? When did you join?
2015 I joined. I was on one of those calls actually. I remember this incident, it was lovely. But I think there were like 50 of us at the time, and I believe like 7 of us were online during that time.
Really?
Plus we had people on customer feedback because people were reaching out to us. So it's hard to say, but it could be 10 people. I don't know. It was 8 years ago.
Yeah, so around 50.
So at least, okay, so at least 3 people are working on it. Thank you very much. Any other questions?
Yes. Do you remember when you actually caused something? Because this was caused by somebody else's fault, but I assume that there must have been occasion where...
Many.
So, can you recall that sort of incident?
Like the last one, or or the most interesting one, or
Your choice.
I don't know. There was many by me or by colleagues. Like usually when you are doing some routine stuff. For example, I was doing some routine database cleanup.
On Friday, I hope.
I don't.
It's the right time for that.
We didn't have a names for days at the time, so it was just another day. And yeah, so it was just a regular routine database cleanup. There was some obsolete user hanging that was not mentioned nowhere in the code or anywhere. So it, for example, looked good to remove, and then you find out that there are some hooks on table inserts that are basically hard coded in database with this user, and so basically all writes to database were down. That's one of examples, one of many.
How did you fix that one? Did you have a rollback?
In this case, I think the first thing was to realize that something's wrong, because it was not so obvious as in this case. It was just some tables were not able to write data. So I think I'm not really sure if I noticed from some alert or I did try manually after touching the database. It was one of these options. And yeah, I remember the fix because I remember that in panic I recreated the user, and and it started working again. So
Is the user still there?
I'm not sure. Maybe.
Probably. So what was the actual fix for this? Because if the registrar just puts a TTL of 0 and changes everything, how do you prevent that?
I think somebody paid for the domain again, and it probably got through
I understand that, but how would you prevent that again? So if the
to prevent.
registrar-
No, you cannot prevent it. It's like you have to call them and make sure that they understand that they cannot do this again, and that's all that you can do.
But they probably gave you a notice before they shut you down.
Because in DNS you should get a time to live change and a change in the DNS.
So they
Yeah,
probably gave you a notice. Or like a
That's something I'm not sure about, because, as I said, it was paid in advance. So maybe it was just some miscommunication between the services, so we didn't even get a notice. It was a weird situation. So, but it didn't happen again from since then. So
that never happens again.
So, any other questions? Seems like no. Thank you, Petra, very much.
thank you.
And let me pass the word to Igor, who is preparing for his speech about how to fail a project. Am I right?
Yeah, basically how to be completely blind to any red flag.
Hi.
So hello everyone, I'm
Great
Igor.
talk.
Thank you. And I cannot use this device as it seems.
As well.
Okay. Just a quick shameful sales slide about who we are. I'm one of the founders of Panaxeo. We are basically a software development company, so we have a lot of customers and we develop software for them, for example, even for Slido. And there is 70 of us. We work with customers all around the world, and we try to work on projects that we like and they matter in some other way than just financial. For example, they are from healthcare or other areas like this. And I would like to today, or normally I'm supposed to tell you how good we are so that you want to work with us. For some reason, today I will be telling you the opposite. So I will tell you about this one project that we did a couple of years ago. I will not specify the customer or anything that will allow you to like identify the customer, because that would be obviously wrong. But I can tell you like how we evaluated the project in the end and what went wrong and what did we like learned about it. So in the beginning, there are always good intentions. We have this cooperation with our customer. This was actually a second project with them. So we knew each other. We know how we operate, how they operate, and the first project ended up really well. So we built on strong foundation. And the first thing that was kind of riskier than usual is that for them this was a high impact project. There was a risk attached on their side because someone from our customer, from their company, they wanted to like achieve something new with this project, and they needed to persuade their management why this project should be funded and why we should work on it. So there was basically a lot of pressure from the beginning. But that itself isn't really a problem. Then they came with the requirements, and it started as a simple application. They had some documentation and something that we can start working with. I mean, usually we are fine even with napkin requirements, like what we get as a first requirements is usually anything. In this case, it was pretty good documentation. And the thing is that they already started building it, but their colleague left them. So they had a project that was already started and needed someone else to continue with it. So there was some idea what it should work, how it should work, and ideally they would like us to continue in the project, which sometimes can be done, sometimes not. So we set up the team. It was a smaller project. Let's say it was for one person for a couple of months, like, I don't know, 5 or something like that. The thing is that when there is solo developer on a project, it's really important that they are able to talk to the customer, to work with the customer, to handle more communication than usual. And it's always easier or more natural to work in a team. In this case, it was not possible because if we created a bigger team, it wouldn't really work out with the budget they had. So we needed to start with one developer. So it was a smaller project. Usually that's fine, but in this case, we chose a developer that was great from technical point of view, but he had some personal stuff going on at that time, and we knew about that, so that there was a risk attached to this. But we knew he was a senior, and he's up to the challenge, so let's give it a try. Then, as I mentioned, this project was already started by the customer. We hopped onto it. We wanted to continue. And then as we started to go through the code base, we didn't really like what we saw. We gave it our best try to keep whatever we can. But in this case, after some analysis, it would be better to actually start from the beginning. The thing is that there was nobody to like discuss what was already done from the customer, because as I mentioned, the person already left their company. There was another person who tried to help us to the best they could, but they didn't really have a clue how it worked. What was even more difficult was that this project couldn't run locally on the machine of the developer. It needed to run in a closed environment with the customer, within their infrastructure. So there were a lot of access rights, VPNs, remote access to virtual machines, etc. So it was very hard to actually get something done. And usually you can go very fast with the development when you develop locally. This was not really the way. The thing is that we spent a lot of time, I mean weeks, just trying to achieve some fast way how to iterate on the features. Instead, we ended up working with non-functional VPN, infrastructure that doesn't really run as it should, CI/CD pipeline that doesn't really build the project as it should, and this was not within our reach, so we were not able to actually fix it. And of course, you need to talk to the customer, explain this, etc. But the time was running, and the project needed to move on. So in the end, we got everything working, but we lost like, I don't know, 2 months just setting everything up. And then, at the beginning, it's always necessary to set up a good communication with the customer. So, for example, nowadays, we usually connect our Slack channels and we are able to discuss anything whenever we need. This was more of an old-fashioned style, so they preferred emails. I mean, it's fine, but it's not very suited for instant communication. It was hard to get them to a meeting, which nowadays is like quite normal. Whenever we need to discuss something, we hop on a meeting and everything works. This was more like sending an emails every day and getting answers in a couple of days. So, guys, our VPN doesn't work. Yeah, answer comes in 4 days. Guys, the CI/CD pipeline doesn't really build it. Answer comes in, I don't know, 5 days. So we wanted naturally to have as much infrastructure and as much anything basically on our side, but in this case, this wasn't really possible. So let's go on. Yeah, and then the management of the project. I mean, we like Scrum quite well. It works on majority of our projects. The thing is that we didn't use it for this one. And Scrum would basically at least help us identify all the errors, and there are remedies for basically any situation that can happen. But for Scrum to work, you need to have stakeholders that are involved in the project. In this case, it was more of old-fashioned delivery. Here are the requirements. In 5 months, please just give us the result. Scrum is not very well accustomed to such development because there are cycles, there are iterations, there are all the ceremonies, retrospectives, and most important, stakeholder meetings where you can regularly check. This wasn't really possible due to the nature of the customer, but it was our responsibility to identify this sooner and accommodate the communication and the management style of the project to it. And then this is the basics. So it was standard fixed time, fixed price project, which means that you have fixed amount of money, you have fixed amount of time. So one would think that you need a fixed scope because otherwise how it can work. But the scope changed over time and it changed regularly. And whenever there was some opportunity to present what is actually done, there were always new requirements, always changes, etc. And I already mentioned that it was, I mean, we lost a lot of time in the beginning just setting up the infrastructure, the communications, setting up the VPN, etc. So in the beginning, we gave them some estimate of the work based on pretty good requirements, but it ended up being like maybe twofold or something like that in the end. So what was the result? I mean, we did deliver the project in the end, but it was quite late. And as I mentioned in the beginning, there was a lot of pressure from one of the stakeholders that they wanted to achieve something with this project. And as it was late, I think something like 6 weeks on 5 months total schedule, it didn't really work well. We got paid eventually. It was a fixed time, fixed price project, so they allocated the budget and they paid us what was there. But as we spent a lot more working on it, it didn't really cover the costs. So this was one of the painful situations where we ended up funding the project from our side. From some point, we called ourselves the investors, but yeah, it wasn't really like that. And this is what I actually didn't like at all, because we really started in a good place. We finished first project with them. There was high trust. We built a trust on the first project, on the first cooperation. We started in a really good place where their guy left them. They needed this project to be done, and they trusted us to like work with this situation, which wasn't easy, but we knew from the beginning. It didn't really well. I mean, obviously, if it's late, it cost us more than we put, or the costs were higher than what we got paid. They got it late, etc. This wasn't really a good finish of the project. But at least we learned something, right? We don't really do fixed time, fixed price projects since then. At least not in the same sense. I mean, for smaller projects, it's fine. But for larger corporations, it's usually time and material, which means that we use Scrum, we do iterations, small iterations. We don't really mind if requirements change over time, because that's how it should be done. If you look at any product company, they never have fixed budget and they don't work with that budget over the years. They usually do something in small increments, even with their internal team. So why should it be any different when they do with external company? So time and material is one of the ways that took majority of the risks from these situations. Then I think right now there is no project that we work on right now that wouldn't use Scrum. We invested a lot of time and effort into understanding it properly for certification, etc. And it can really remedy the majority of such problems. And it forces us to work with the stakeholders a lot closer. Then there is risk management. I mean, when you hear it like this in 15 minutes all together, you might be wondering, like, how could you not see that? The thing is that all of these things happened over time, over the course of, I don't know, 5 or 6 months. So every single one of them is basically normal for any project that we do. There is always some problem with one of those things. When they compound together and they meet on one single cooperation, this is how it ends up. So it wasn't clear from the beginning that this is how it will end up. It's more of a retrospective now, because at that time there was a lot of hoping, of course. Don't use that as a management tool. I don't really advise that. And then when we looked at it afterwards, we thought that it would be better if we didn't take that project at all, because we had the right developer from technical perspective, but it was a risk to put him on this alone. It was messy from the beginning in terms that there was something done. There is really no knowledge on how it will be, where it should go. And the environment itself was very restrictive, yeah. VPNs, CI/CD pipeline, not with us, but with closed infrastructure of the customer. So there were a lot of risks that could have, or nowadays we would see them more clearly, and we would probably evaluate this in a slightly more manner. And not everybody is suited to work on a project alone. I mean, we have many people that are on a project alone even nowadays, but there are more skills they need to possess if they need to work on a project alone. They need to be able to basically communicate with the customer more frequently. They need to have some soft skills, some managerial skills, and not everybody is suited for this. So these are basically what things we learned out of this cooperation. And I think that's all, if this worked. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's get to the questions. And first one doesn't seem like a question.
Scrum sucks. Yes.
Scrum sucks.
Is that the question?
Does Scrum suck?
It has its ups and downs.
Yeah.
It solves more problems for us than it creates.
Okay. So it sounds like it doesn't.
I mean, I don't know better way how to do things, even though not really everyone likes Scrum, but if you prefer waterfall, I mean, be my guest. But if the person who wrote that, I mean, do you have any better alternative? I'm just quite curious. Okay, so agile, basically, yes. Something agile.
Agile, not Scrum.
Okay, I can deal with that.
And we have it back.
Okay.
First project worked well with one-way email communication?
Yes. The thing is that the first project was everything in the development phase was within our infrastructure and within our reach. So we could decide what technology will be used. We could iterate fast. We could build everything, and we could deploy everything into production, because it was not a web application, but it was something that we could have done from 0 to 100% ourselves. In the second project, the fact that we were too dependent on their infrastructure, that made one of the biggest changes here.
What was so magical about their infrastructure?
I'm sorry?
What was so magical about the infrastructure that you could replicate it or simulate it on your end?
Nothing. The thing was, there was nothing magical. It was more about that this piece of software needed to connect to other modules, and they didn't really have like separate environments, etc. Of course, we could mock everything, but ultimately, we decided not to do this on such a small project. It would take a lot of time. So the thing is that we need to connect to 3 other separate systems, and to be able to do that, we need to be in their environment. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that they were not so cooperative, so we waited for an email for 4 days. What do you do in such situations?
This is the hardest, actually, because if you know before you start developing, then you have still time to say no to the project, which is usually what we would do nowadays. If you find out during the cooperation, then we are, I'm thinking of the right word, aggressive come to mind, but assertive probably. We are more assertive towards them, so we wouldn't wait as long as we did in the past to call it out and to try to change it in a way. And nowadays we would probably explain more clearly than we need more cooperation, because this will not end well. So it's only about this. Okay.
And the last in the list, would it help if there were more developers on that project?
It would help if we didn't take the risk that, we knew that this person had some personal things that prevent them to be responsive, like in a usual full-time manner, and just not having this would solve some of the communication problems. So this was like a mix of developer that had some things on his mind, one-way communication to the customer, etc. And when you mix this together, this is the result. So I described like 5 or 6 things that went wrong. If only 4 of them, or if only 3 of them went wrong, it might be a lot better outcome than it was ultimately.
Thanks, Igor. Any other questions?
I have 2 quick questions. The first, how you mentioned that it was better to refuse that project. How many times since that you had a chance to refuse some customer because it looks very similar to this?
We ask better questions in the beginning, and we are like never too eager to refuse a project because it's very hard to come by new projects. But we ask more questions. We ask more questions about what is their strategy with their project, how are they going to market it, what is their audience. I mean, we want to make sure that they have a plan. And we want to believe in that plan because still nowadays there are many situations when someone comes, wants the next best product developed tomorrow, and they have like no marketing strategy, etc. So there are like red flags that immediately show up, and we just tell them, okay, I mean, we can develop this, but what are you going to do with it afterwards? And then they suddenly realize, yeah, I mean, we should have some marketing strategy, etc. So I would say that we ask better questions in the beginning.
Okay. And the second one is, I have some experience from the past from this business. And a couple of years ago, it was really tough because we learned the same thing. We learned material time is the best strategy to create the best product.
I agree.
Yeah, because you can work in iterations.
Right.
And that's the best way. So, but it was really difficult to persuade Slovak customers to work.
It is still.
So it's still, right? Okay, so if it's not just sensitive information, how many customers in percentage do you have from Slovakia and from other countries?
I don't know the number of customers, but I can say that over 80% of our revenue comes from the United States.
Okay, so that's where we start.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And the last popped up in Slido. So are you training your staff for such situations?
Yes, I mean, all of them right now have several Scrum certifications. My other co-founder, Adam, he's the guy that is great at management, and he personally sits with every manager, every project manager with our company. He tries to coach them as much as possible. So yeah, I mean, training is definitely necessary and regular.
Thank you. That was probably the last one.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much as well, Igor. As we mentioned Agile, I have to refresh the presentation because we have the last but not least speaker, Adam, and he just finished his slide. So let me just refresh this. Probably. You can probably start from here.
Yeah.
Okay. Stage is yours.
Yeah. So, hello. My name is Adam Hamšík, and I will be telling you some stories from very dark world of DevOps, and how we are failing forward and learning by failing. And let's go. Oh, wait. So I started a company called Labyrinth Labs, and we are one-stop shop for DevOps, Kubernetes, and cloud. So my background is technical. I used to be a DevOps engineer, but these days I mostly go to sales meetings and talk to potential customers, which is not that funny, but yeah, what you can do. You start a company and think that you will do whatever you want to, and then you end up on sales meetings. So make sure you be aware of that. So generally, I would like to talk about three things. First, like why DevOps always sees some screw-ups and some problems, and why it always happens to us. The second point is some stories and experience we used to have, like what happened to us, like when, why, and like our life is not easy. And so what we learn, and there is a very good point, and I advise everyone to look here, and I wrote it before we had a first presentation. It's always a DNS problem. It's always, like it never looks like a DNS problem at the beginning, but it's always a DNS problem. So yeah, 0 days saying it was DNS. So DevOps and screw-ups. So very often, like DevOps is part of a company which basically works, and the only time we are really needed is when things doesn't work. So that's when we are asked, like, why it doesn't work? Like, what happened? So I try to put a diagram. I'm not sure if you are see that. Like, I was told that there's going to be 4 screens here, but yeah, like we traded up for a single one. So this is a decision tree. So I will have to explain it, but generally it starts in a way that if we have an outage, is it a developer's fault? That's the first question we ask. Generally, and very often, answer is yes. If no, then we have to ask ourselves as the DevOps engineers, are we really sure? And generally, the answer is no. So we check it again. And if we are very, very sure, then have we tried to turn it off and on again? And if that doesn't fix our problem, then it's DNS. On the other side, when we are like very sure that it's a developer's problem, then we explain them how to fix it. Like this is what you do. Like you don't drop a database table on Friday night before you leave. There's a bad practice. Don't do it again, and so on. And then we try to set up an automation for it. So we create a pipeline, we create a job, whatever, and then we have to maintain it over time. So we have work to do over time and over. And this way we have ability to troubleshoot our own automation, so we are not really not needed anymore. So, and if we know how to fix it and everything works, then we write the documentation which becomes outdated on day 1. So this is very often story we see, and just be aware, like this is just funny stuff. Like I'm not really mean it anyway, but yeah, very often, like when we have an outage, we talk to a developer and we ask him, like, "Hey man, like you forgot index on database," and he will say us, he will tell us that, "Oh yeah, like it worked on my machine. Like what's the problem? It's problem on the cloud." Yeah, so we as a DevOps engineers are very often needed when only needed when things go wrong. Like the things we take care of are distributed and dynamic systems, which are very complex, and very often there is a lot of things which can go wrong with very little change. And very often you can see the problems in money. And I will show you a couple of examples how we spend a lot of money where we didn't have to. Yeah. So this is a very nice example how a very small change and repeated over time can lead to a very big problems later on. So initially we started with one of our customers, and they had a bunch of different teams maintaining different applications, and as we can see these days. And when we took over, we found out that every team had their own sort of automation, and they didn't really care of that. And if we wanted to make a change, it was like distributed across 5 or 7 teams. And it took very long to actually push anything there. So we took ownership of that, but now we had 30 pipelines to maintain. So we had to think about it, like how to actually improve that, how to make sure that we can actually maintain them over time. So we introduced sort of templates or library which you can use and to create modularized pipelines. Over time, like we generally created very same pipelines over and over again, and we deploy them for every single project. But there was one developer who actually had an access who could change the pipeline on his own because he thought it's actually a good idea. And the changes he introduced there were just like, I don't like this default, I will turn it off, I will do this or that. And generally he changed the behavior of the application or the pipeline in a way that when you run a deployment in a certain way, how we were used to with every other pipeline, it created a different sort of a deployment in Kubernetes. We generally use blue-green deployments, and this one was creating by default rolling updates. And so obviously there was no documentation there, it was just one change. And the lesson here is that, yeah, like we should have a very better PR review process there, and we should be able to catch these problems, but we didn't. So one day we had to deploy a new version of the application and migrate to a different database because there were some changes or whatever. We do this quite often, so we thought like there's not going to be any issue. Like we did it like 5 or 7 times before. It's the same pipeline, it's the same thing. Like it's just like plain business as usual. But no, this little change created a setup where we had like from 100 containers we were running in production, 50 was writing to an original database, and another 50 was writing to a new database. So we split the brain on the database, we made changes there, and it took us a week to get it back together, and we like it was a very painful process. So yeah, so the lesson here is that like be aware of things you are changing and what you are doing. It took us 50 minutes to create the work for 2 weeks, and we never really get back together. Like we just said, okay, this one is going to be the new database. We throw away the other one, and we wait for users to complain, and then we whatever do fix them database or do some changes for them. So yeah, this is another case where we work with another client where they have using tunnels and Prometheus as a monitoring system, and they were gathering metrics as we generally do in every case. And after a while, we find out that like there is a bunch of metrics, there is like terabytes of metrics, but it takes very long time to actually load a longer period of time, like more than 30 days. Like we couldn't really look at the metrics for longer periods of time, and then we started to investigate and look at it, and there is a service which will aggregate those metrics over time to put them together and calculate averages and so on. And this service was not running for 1.5 years. And we thought like, oh yeah, like we want to see the metrics, like we want to see the trend over a year. And then we figure out how to fix it, and we launch it. And it was running for a week, and then for a month. And then we thought like, oh yeah, like it was slowly turning and running. And after a while, like after 2 months, we look at it, and it was finally finished, and we were very happy with the results. But when we look at the costs, it spent like $10,000 on just on S3 requests and points. So lesson, it was not really worth it. Like, we are never gonna look at those metrics anymore, and like we should drop them and move on. It doesn't have that value. This is a very interesting story which goes with multiple levels. So we were asked by our customer to look at the costs of AWS, because generally we do that very often, like every couple of months for every customer. We look at that, like we look at the changes, try to figure out like if there is anything wrong or what is the behavior. And we look at the part of the bill was a networking cost, which is like traffic between different availability zones. And that cost was quite large compared to other costs you could find in that bill. And then we try to split it into different applications and try to figure out like which application is taking a lot or how and so on. And we look at database networking costs, and we find out that one of the smaller applications the customer had took almost 1/3 of the networking traffic cost for databases. And as it really goes, then we had to do quite a lot of black magic there, like sacrifice a goat and use TCP dump and strays and do other weird shit to find out that there was one query in the database which was like basically generating the whole traffic. And when we came to a developer and asked him, hey man, like, have you looked at this query? Like, we think that you are like using select without limit on a table with a bunch of like thousands of rows. And he said, oh no, that table is almost empty. There is nothing there. There is no need to use limit in our SQL query. And then he looked at the actual table and forgot that he has some sort of a cron job which was filling the data for 10 years. And now there is 1 million of rows. And this is how the graph looks like. This is when we came. This number of server nodes the application was using over time. And this is the number of servers we needed after. So it's like, I don't know, 1/5. And this was running for years. Like, no one really noticed that. Like, this was running for years and years. And yeah, the last but not least is Kubernetes in production. Like, what could go wrong by using Kubernetes in production and not really reading the manual? So when we started to use Kubernetes in production, we were trying to like use very fast and lean and try to learn on the go. And we didn't use any requests or limits on our containers. So scheduler was really putting every container and every pod into like 3 or 4 servers they had. And once we switched the production traffic there, this is how the servers look like. This is like 7,000% utilization on a server. Yeah, so we had, this was going for a while, and then we find out that the servers are really like dead, and we had to like fix that. But it was a funny story, like if you move fast. So for us, very often, like this is from Silicon Valley, failure on us a success. Failure equals success. So very often we learn and we move forward. Like outages will happen and will occur all the time, and we don't really try to. We try to prevent them, obviously, but there is nothing. You better learn and move on when it happens. So when outage happens, like this is what you have to learn here. It's always developer's fault or DNS. That's it. And the third thing is that the documentation becomes outdated on the day you wrote it. And yeah, and we as DevOps engineers develop automation to maintain more automation. Yeah, that's it. Do you have any questions?
very much. Any questions?
Yeah.
The real scaling issues in advance.
Yeah, like we hit bunch of them over the years, but I think that was too complicated. But the one with Kubernetes that was later fixed by like really scaling the cluster over the years, and that helped.
Are you using something like Carpenter?
Yes. These days, yes. In those times, no. Carpenter didn't exist then.
Sounds like that's all from the questions.
Yeah, they want pizza.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I know that the pizza came and it really grabs the attention. I'm used to that. Okay, guys, that's it for today. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for great speeches, and let's get to pizza. And feel free to send the feedback survey. How did you like the event? How did you like the pizza? How did you like the talks?